IVM. This episode of Mr. and Mrs. Binge-Watch is powered by Storytel.in, and this week the book that I'm recommending is called Twin Beds. It's been written by Anita Nair and it's been narrated by two actors who I'm actually really fond of. There's Konkana Sen Sharma and there's Satyadeep Mishra. The story is about a couple who's been married for many years, and so much so that everything seems boring, everything seems the same, everything seems like it's a repeat of something that's already happened in their lives. But they go on a vacation, and in their hotel rooms and on through the course of that vacation, something changes. And for the first time in a very long time, there's a sense of excitement and passion in their relationship. It's an interesting tale, one that also sort of, comes to life with these two actors and their powerful voices. I'd highly recommend you checking this out on Storytel. Go to storytel.com/IVM to get a 30-day free trial as compared to a 14-day free trial. You've tuned into a show called Mr. and Mrs. Binge-Watch, and you were expecting a spoiler-free episode. So there are many spoilers on this episode. Kripya dhyan dijiye.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Mr. and Mrs. Binge-Watch. Christmas is around the corner, and what's better on Christmas than a hot, fuzzy, warm hug of a movie or a TV show, right, Janice? I mean, don't you remember watching those really fun Christmas movies growing up? I mean, except that we lived in India, so I ended up watching Christmas movies sometimes around Holi, but I watched them and, imagine Christmas in New York and how it would be, like just watching Home Alone 2, for example.
I think all of us, just because Home Alone films were such a rage around Christmas time, it's like after a point, expectation bahut zyada badh gaya that Christmas needs to be white, Christmas needs to have these massive Christmas tree installations everywhere. Christmas needs to have these fancy gifts. And in my house, by the way, and I'm Catholic, ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता है. I mean, if I get one fancy-ass meal on Christmas, which my grandmother lovingly cooks every year, वो बहुत बड़ी बात है.
Nappy's lunches are quite legendary.
Yeah, but I'm saying that it ruined it for Indian Christmases because
you mean like turkey meals and stuff like that?
It's not about the food. You know what I mean? I mean, in my house, no one was hanging up stockings and putting things inside the stockings.
Yeah, it's not because this is not the US at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, but Christmas is Christmas, no? And then when you are a child and you're growing up on Home Alone films and you're like, मेरे घर पे ऐसा क्यों नहीं होता है? Why don't we have a massive tree?
ऐसा नहीं है, मतलब अगर तू बैंड्रा जाएगी क्रिसमस टाइम पे तो ऐसा लगेगा कि तू न्यूयॉर्क में आ गई है. Just Bandra is the place where
I don't know what part of Bandra you're going to that reminds you of New York, by the way. And nothing in Bandra reminds me of New York.
No, I meant in terms of the level of decorations and stuff.
Bandra is beautiful around Christmas. Yeah, that you're right for. Yeah.
But yeah, I remember watching so many movies on Christmas. Home Alone 2, of course, was the one where he actually ends up going to New York. But my favorite Christmas movie is a movie that a lot of people don't associate with Christmas because it's not mushy or anything or fuzzy or any of that. It's Die Hard. Because the first Die Hard, of course, unfolds on Christmas night. And I think it's the best Christmas movie ever.
I feel like I should make this confession before I walk into a trap. So you know how they ask you which are those classics that you haven't
Janice,
watched?
I'll tell you your Die Hard story better than you will. You know what your Die Hard story is? That there was one night, everyone should know this. There was one night that Hotstar dropped Die Hard for the first time. And I turn around to Janice and I'm like, dude, they've got Die Hard on. And she's like, dude, I haven't watched it. I was like, what? You've got to drop everything.
Yeah.
We've got to start watching Die Hard right now. Now, here's the thing. I had not watched Die Hard for at least 5 to 6 years before that night. I mean, I used to watch it a lot often when I was living by myself or with my parents. But after I moved in with Janice, I don't think I'd watched Die Hard for a while.
Huh. And
I was so damn excited. I was like, you know what? My girl's going to
sit
with me.
Why are you talking about me in third person?
Because yeah, I mean, this is specifically to everyone who's listening in. And I'm thinking that, I'm going to sit with my girl and I'm going to watch one of my favorite movies ever. And I'm like, Janice, listen, this is Nakatomi Plaza. And, that's Hans Gruber. These are the terrorists. They're going to take over. And then I turn around at one point and she's fallen asleep. And she's fallen asleep in the 12th minute of the movie. It's like the guests in the hotel don't even know that they are hostages. even before they find out, Janice has fallen asleep. Guess what happened? I ended up watching the entire movie all over again.
And not just that, so the thing with Aniruddha is that he can't stop at just one franchise film,
Especially
right?
if it's
मतलब अगर वो
Die Hard.
Avengers से शुरू करेगा, जब तक Endgame नहीं देखा है, he'll feel like his life has no meaning. Like at this point,
But that doesn't work for all series. See, I'll tell you what, we are going to do it with the Star Wars movies before the final one airs.
Fair.
We have to, by the way.
We can't watch 22 Avenger films again.
No, but I don't wish to watch 22 Avengers
I don't
films.
know. Actually, sometimes, I just feel like maybe it's a good refresher course. Like last night, actually, we were watching the Endgame climax.
Yeah, because I have been watching...
And you watched it 4 times now.
That's because... Ever since the movie landed on Hotstar, I've been treating it like a TV show. I've been watching 30 minutes every day. And last night I told Janice, I've got the last 40 minutes left. It's like the big battle. Let's watch it. And yeah.
And I felt a bit like what time nahi hua us film ko, but I was still looking and going like, why can't I connect all the dots right now? Like it took me a minute to remember that Vision had died, that Black Widow had died. I'm sorry if this is a massive spoiler for you if you've not watched Endgame, but if you've not watched Endgame, then why? What the are you doing?
Yeah. But
it's not my fault.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's besides the point. The main
And
important thing is that you fell asleep while watching Die Hard.
I have not
watched Die Hard. We are talking about
Die
Christmas
Hard.
movies right now.
Yeah, but
so let's stick
what
to
do you know about The Holiday? Aniruddha, it's one of the most watched films around.
I love The Holiday. Why are you suddenly pivoting to a random movie name? You think you'll throw in a movie name? I'll be like, oh, Holiday. I have no idea, Janice.
I love The Holiday. It's one of those films that
but
I feel
Janice,
like
my
I can
question
watch.
to you...
We're talking about Christmas movies.
No. My question to you is, when are you going to watch Die Hard? It's still up on Hotstar.
You mean before the license
It's a 1 hour,
ends?
50-minute film. You start in the morning when you're up and awake and fresh.
So, okay, I have to, because you've gone here now, I have to say something, okay? Aniruddha has this bad habit. Every time a new big film drops on an OTT platform that we really want to watch, like The Irishman,
yeah,
we'll make plans about watching it every day. Now, he knows that his wife, aka me, falls asleep by 1 o'clock latest, unless for some strange reason I'm wired that day. But yet, our man will take his sweet time after gym, will come home and eat his sweet potatoes, will chill. And in my house,
why don't you
making
just tell
chai
them what am I
is
going
a
to drop
saga.
a shit now next?
I'm going to say
why
that.
Why don't you say that as well?
I'm just saying, in our household,
and how many grams of chicken I eat?
In our household, making Aniruddha's chai, or rather Aniruddha making his own chai, is a fucking saga.
Janice,
It'll be
this
like
is
everything
not
will
that
be...
kind of a show.
By the time all of this is done, it is suddenly 11:30 at night, and I'm like, I need to sleep in the next 1.5 hours. But nahi, tabhi teko film shuru
So
karne
here's
ka.
my point. I can completely give you that on Die Hard. I remember we started post 11 p.m. and you obviously fell asleep. I am not watching The Irishman with you. Just know that the only reason
It's a 3.5 hour film.
So we are recording this on December 3rd. I don't know when it's going to air. We still haven't watched it. It's been out for 6 days. And the reason being that I am not going to watch The Irishman until I know Janice is away from home for at least 6 hours so that I can sit down and watch that movie at a stretch without pausing, without taking a break.
I am not the person who takes a chai pause, a potty pause, let's feed the cats pause.
I'll do
let's go eat
everything
dinner
before
pause.
I start watching The Irishman. But my point is that you are going to fall asleep. It's a 3-hour, 15-minute film. You are going to fall asleep whether we start at 11 p.m. or at 7 p.m.
No. If you start at 7 p.m, of course, it's not like I don't like going for late night films. No, it's not that bad.
Anyway, so with Christmas around the corner, and since we've spoken about so many of these movies that are such great, viewing experiences on Christmas,
we're going to talk about Modern Love on Amazon Prime. It's an Amazon Prime original. It's got 8 episodes, and each of the episodes sort of deals with a different kind of love. It's not necessarily a typical romance kind of love stories. It's just about love and relationships. This show sort of came with a lot of promise, a lot of hype, a lot of big names attached to it. And out of the 8 episodes, Aniruddha, I don't know how many episodes you enjoyed, but I think just counting on my fingertips, I think I enjoyed at least 5 out of the 8.
So here's the thing, right? Modern Love is a show that's been written and directed by John Carney. He is the guy who made Begin Again, a movie I really, really liked. And of course, the show is based on the Modern Love column that appears in the New York Times. And, it's been a great reading experience for so many people for so many years, because, to be able to live through people's experiences through an article or a column where they open themselves up and tell their stories. And all these stories have a certain extraordinary element about them, right? Is what made the column what it is. So the idea is that if a story that is real, but yet, I mean, it's real yet extraordinary, it should translate into a great viewing experience automatically, right? But I mean, when you're watching a TV show or a film, and because you're used to seeing extraordinary stories in any case, you always need a little bit more than just a coincidence or something out of the ordinary, right? Which might seem very interesting in a conversation with another person when they're talking about their own experiences, or even in a column when you're reading it. But a TV show or a film or any piece of audiovisual needs to be a little bit more than that. So I feel with Modern Love, what has happened is that a lot of stories that made for really interesting reading didn't necessarily translate into great episodes. Like, for example, when Cupid is a prying journalist is this episode that has Dev Patel and Catherine Keener in it. Nice episode, very
interesting,
very
premise.
warm, sort of performances. But I really enjoyed reading the article a lot more than I did watching the episode. The other thing that's interesting is that a bunch of publications, the New York Times themselves, in fact, have done a comparison between the original article and the episode as it turned out. I think people should totally go and check those out. And I feel that if this show leads to some people who weren't aware of the column discovering it, and going ahead and actually checking out the Modern Love column, then the show would have, served its purpose. But coming back to the TV show, irrespective of what you feel about the column or don't feel about the column, just like you rightly pointed out, it's impossible for all 8 episodes to be great, right?
Yeah, I mean,
because that's the nature of any anthology series or film. You always tend to like only a clutch of, episodes or stories in a film.
No, and also the thing with converting a column which reads beautifully on paper and then you're trying to, kind of fit it for the visual medium or adapt it for the screen. I don't know. I feel like we're so used to everything ending with some sort of an impact or some sort of a twist or something at the end that leaves you with a memory of why this entire story was so significant. Doesn't necessarily happen in real life stories, right? I mean, for example, the story that you picked up in Cupid is a prying journalist. Great idea about a guy who's developed an app about dating.
Correct.
And about finding true love. Bumping into a journalist who he ends up talking about his true love story with.
Right.
But there's nothing remarkable that happens at the end of that story other than
there's nothing remarkable from the point of view of it being a television show.
Yeah.
But in real life, so just to go a little deep, further in that, so basically what happens is that Catherine Keener, the journalist, is interviewing Dev Patel, who's the app developer, like Janice said, to whom he essentially tells the love story of his own life. About this girl he met, fell in love with, they moved in together, and then they broke up. But he continued to love her, and he did not know what she felt about him. But the article that was published by the Catherine Keener character was read by that girl, who then got in touch with him. So in a sense, a news column, an article, an interview actually brought 2 sort of lovers who had been torn apart together. Now, that is an extraordinary story to happen in real life. But is it an extraordinary story to be seen on a TV show or a film? Because in a setup like that, you always expect your protagonists to end up together after having faced a certain number of conflicts, right? So I feel the moment it begins to feel like a piece of fiction is when it actually begins to lag. The more it stays realistic. And in the ye ho sakta hai in real life, and maybe it's not extraordinary, but it's got something that's, quirky. It works.
Like, for example, I think both of us are unanimous in the fact that we love the first episode of the show.
Yeah.
When the doorman is your main man. Now, in this, you have the protagonist is this young girl who's going out on multiple dates. And yet, every time she's coming back from a date, it's almost like she's looking for her doorman's approval. And based on his approval or disapproval is how she decides whether that relationship should be taken ahead or not. And sometimes she's gone against his approval and still gone ahead with the relationship only for it to end violent disaster. And then they show various phases of this doorman and this girl's relationship, where she goes through breakups, she goes through boyfriends, she goes through a pregnancy, she goes through raising her daughter, and it's such a beautifully shown and enacted story. I mean, the guy who plays Guzman, the doorman, is Laurentio Posa. Is that correct?
Yeah. He plays an Albanian character on the show. Also,
Yeah.
it's important to point out that he's a much older gentleman. So he's almost like a father figure
Correct.
in Maggie's
It's not
life.
like a sexual figure at all. He's just a father figure or doorman. First of all, also doormans are not, I mean, for the Indian context, a doorman is, of course, our equivalent of sort of like a watchman, but were way more respected and way more with lot more dignity of labor, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Also, Christine Milioti plays Maggie. She's somebody who I've always, been a big fan of. I didn't think that they did. She was great in, How I Met Your Mother, where she actually eventually played the mother, because I felt that track was not well written and it was extremely underdeveloped. But I think as a performer, Christine Milioti is really something.
Yeah, but I'm saying this is the episode that sort of sets up the tone.
Yeah.
And it's
nice and
it also
heartwarming
sets
and
up
fuzzy.
the bar, because you feel like the first story is so fateh, so great, and then your second story, which is the Dev Patel one, isn't as great. You're a little like, okay. But then again, I mean, the next episode is stars Anne Hathaway. It's called Take Me As I Am, Whoever I Am.
Yeah. Just quickly coming back to the first episode, what I really liked about it is the fact that it was about a platonic relationship, right? And on a show called Modern Love, you're just expecting it to be about romance. And I like the fact that they set the context of what to expect from the remaining 7 episodes, wherein, in fact, I feel even the second episode, the Modern Love could totally be between the author and the journalist, really, because there are two people who meet each other on a off chance and end up reconnecting with their soulmates because of that one meeting. And it's not like they continue to keep in touch or become friends, or but it's a form of modern love, which I think is kind of cool.
Of course, in the third episode, Take Me As I Am, Whoever I Am, you've got Anne Hathaway playing the main protagonist. And this episode is really about her and about her bipolar syndrome. I mean, I feel like the story is very inconsequential over here, but it's about how she carries this episode on her shoulders. Because initially when you see her as a sparkling, vivacious, energetic girl who's, going out on this, oh my God, so amazing date with a guy that she's met at a supermarket of all the places. And she never turns up, and then you realize through the episode that she actually suffers from a very, very she suffers from bipolar syndrome, because of which she can't even get out of bed.
Yeah.
She can't do a lot of the things that we do, and it's an episode that focuses on mental health and loving yourself and eventually coming out from that state of depression and sadness and getting over your own sort of illness. But it's also about, like, this episode was all about performance for me. I mean, like I said, the story was really inconsequential. The other characters weren't really important. For me, it was just about Anne Hathaway.
No, in fact, I really liked this episode because, by the way, the episode got a lot of criticism for sort of trivializing depression. Because the way the story has been told, it's been told in a musical sort of film format, where Anne Hathaway's character sort of swings between extreme joy and extreme sadness. And so the telling of the story keeps changing accordingly. So a lot of people felt that jarring tonally, but that's what I loved about the episode, actually, if I can be frank about it. Of course, Anne Hathaway is amazing. She pretty much delivers one of the best performances of the show. But I really liked the take on bipolar disorder, because I feel like in a feature film with the same story, you probably cannot experiment with tone to that extent, because there's always the fear of, inconsistency over a period of 90 minutes, 100 minutes or whatever. But in a 25, 26 minute format, you can clearly experiment. So for example, with the lights changing with her state of mind, or the fact that, she breaks into a song when she's delirious and happy. I really liked those parts about the episode as well. And I also loved the way it came together in the end, because again, much like the first episode, this episode is not about her reconnecting or, finally getting over her depression and making a relationship work. It's really about her coming out with the reality of her being depressed for the first time to her co-worker and now friend. So it's again the relationship between the co-worker and herself is what really drives the story without even realizing it till it comes together in the end. So I like that. I like that the emphasis is not on romance. Then, of course, the next episode, was something that I was really looking forward to because Tina Fey, John Slattery, two amazing actors. And you're absolutely right when you say that they have cast all their actors so well and their performances are so good that some of the episodes work purely because of the presence of those actors.
Yeah, but rallying to keep the game alive, it stars Tina Fey and John Slattery. Despite the fact that they've got two phenomenal actors, just doesn't work. Because, we've also seen way too many... Like, this is not a unique story. Their marriage story is literally not a unique story, right?
Yeah.
We've seen countless shows where a couple is at the, the counselor or the psychiatrist's office or the therapist's office trying to work through their marriage and keeping the spark alive. So I just feel like in terms of story, only this was a very weak story. I wasn't invested. Even their performances, they really didn't have that much to do. It was
No, I loved it. I thought John Slattery's performance, I'm saying I loved the performances.
Guha is also very biased towards John Slattery. John Slattery in anything he
No,
watch.
I thought John Slattery in this because I like that John Slattery, he always plays a certain kind of a character who's slightly intense, slightly serious, and who's always the asshole in a lot of ways, even when he's not intense and serious. And in this show, I felt like he had a certain charming quality about him, which was really fun to watch. He was really funny and witty, I felt. But yeah, it wasn't really a great episode. What's interesting to note is that the episode was directed by Sharon Horgan, the actor from Catastrophe. In fact, both her and Emmy Rossum, the main lead of Shameless, have directed episodes as well. Emmy Rossum's episode, in fact, was the 6th one, called So He Looked Like Dad. It was just dinner, right? And it had Julia Garner and Shia Wiggum. Again, such good casting. And, Julia Garner is somebody Janice and I love because of her work on Ozark. And Shia Wiggum, of course, is a veteran.
I also enjoyed this episode. It's very weird and sort of got, it's one of those episodes because essentially Shia Wiggum's character, Julia Garner's character has a whole sort of daddy crush on the architect or the main man at her boss in a sense, and she ends up going there's almost like miscommunications on both ends where she thinks that he enjoys being her daddy and he thinks he's actually getting into a relationship with her, which sort of gets clarified through the episode. But this episode makes you so uncomfortable, and yet I thought it was kind of cool. Like, it was a very funny, weird story to
sure.
watch.
On the, in a sense, yeah, from a point of view of it being a slightly weirder story than the others, yes, it did make
taking daddy issues to a whole new level.
And it makes you feel kind of uncomfortable and squirmy in places, and it comes together nicely in the end. I'm just saying that, again, it's like, I don't know how that would read as a first-person account.
In fact, I think it would read really well.
That's what I mean. So I'm saying that maybe it would read like a great story. But from the point of view of watching it, I didn't hate it. It's just that I didn't love it as much as some of the other episodes. And I didn't even love the 5th episode, in fact, at the hospital and
Again,
Interlude of
another
Clarity.
episode that I actually thought was kind of cute.
So you liked 8 out of 8, basically.
Yeah, no, I liked about maybe 5 out of 8.
How? You've already counted out 5 episodes out of 6.
I don't like rallying to keep the game
That's
alive.
it. That's the only one you didn't like.
No, I also didn't particularly enjoy when Cupid is a prying journalist.
But to be frank, I don't think that I disliked any episode. I'm just saying in sort of an order of which I liked most and
ranking,
least.
huh?
These two would be the episodes that would rank the lowest. It's got John Gallagher Jr. and Sofia Boutella. Of course, John Gallagher Jr., you'll remember as the guy from Newsroom, and of course his breakout performance was a movie called Short Term 12 that he was fantastic in, which was also the breakout movie of Captain Marvel, Brie Larson. Both of them were fantastic in that. This one kind of didn't work for me, as much as the others.
It's basically a couple going on their first date or second date.
The
date when you eventually have sex, and right before they're about to have sex, calamity strikes. He ends up cutting himself really badly and has to be rushed to the hospital. So there's this girl you're on your second or third date with. You were meant to have sex with her tonight, but now you're in the hospital. Does she stick around? Does she leave? And she's the kind of girl it's like, oh my God, am I actually with her? Has she agreed to go out on a date with me? Is she really into me? So it's about two people who are sort of insecure about two very different things, who over the course of 1.5 day sort of really end up opening up to each other and talking about themselves and talking about how they landed on that date.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought, again, it must have been a fantastic story to read. On paper, this kind of a story, like, where it's over 1.5. We've all had those very long, memorable dates, no?
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
me?
no, sure.
You
No,
know,
and also
dates which go in a very unexpected
I loved
direction.
the idea. I loved the one line of the idea. I loved the fact that it was about a date gone wrong, and it's about two people who are still trying to salvage it in some form of the other. And
have you had a date gone wrong?
Several. I mean, not like landing up in the hospital wrong. But I think that's what makes this episode interesting. I'm saying that it's really something that you're at a date, you're about to start having sex, and then you cut yourself and you have to go to the hospital because you're losing blood. It's like really quite a crazy story. Apart from that, there are 2 more episodes, and I really enjoyed the 7th episode the most. It's called Hers Was a World of One. Again, directed by John Carney. It's got everybody's favorite actor at the moment, Andrew Scott, in it. Where he's playing, the partner of Andy, played by Brandon Kyle Goodman. And they basically, sort of adopt the baby of Carla, played by Olivia Cook. And essentially, during the whole pregnancy period, Carla lives in with the two of them. And this was my favorite episode of the 8, because I felt like there was in addition to all the warmth and sort of the romantic and the other heartwarming moments of the other episodes, this episode was really high on wit.
This was your favorite episode, though, even more than the Guzman story.
Yeah, I
1?
think this was the episode that I enjoyed watching the most, because I felt like it had the perfect graph in terms of a story. It started off being a sort of a comical story about 2 men meeting their, two men who are trying to have a baby, meeting this prospective sort of woman that they're going to be adopting a baby from. And she's somebody who lives on the street.
She's
and
a complete hippie and
these two guys,
the street, yeah.
And these 2 guys are gay in every sense of the term, which is that, they are the quintessential gay men stereotypes, which is that they are extremely clean and they are fashionable. And both of them, come from a pretty well-to-do sort of a background, or at least Andrew Scott does, in terms of the jobs they do and the money they make, and they're really posh. So it starts off on that funny note, and it goes into a sort of a drama space in the middle, where, they are very uncomfortable around each other because they're so different from each other, and ends on a really heartwarming and emotional moment where she eventually hands her baby over to him. And it's almost like Andrew Scott and Olivia Cook's characters don't get along through the entire process of the surrogacy, but ends up with him being in the room with her while she's delivering the baby. And I just felt like, in terms of being a complete story, this was the one of all the 8. I just felt like it was closed-ended. All the characters, sort of were very clear to me. Their interactions were great. It was funny. It was heartwarming. It was emotional. I really liked this episode.
And of course, the 8th episode, The Race Grows Sweeter, near its final lap, directed by Tom Hall, who's the 4th director on the show.
Right.
This is sort of, track of an older couple, a senior citizen couple, really, who seem to be into marathon and races, and that's where they meet and fall in love. It's a really short and sweet episode, because halfway through the episode, the man that she's in love with passes away. And from his funeral is when, they begin to sort of bring in little moments that connect all the other 7 tracks.
Yeah.
So, when she's running in the rain, which is a moment that she would share with her husband, there's a little intercut where they show you how the couple that went on that tragic date, which ended up in the hospital, how they met for the first time.
Right.
Or how Dev Patel is now catching up with the journalist after, he
having gotten back with
his girlfriend.
Old lover, yeah.
And of course, there's a moment with, Guzman and Maggie. So this last episode sort of, it doesn't necessarily tell you where all the other tracks are at, but it just has moments from the other track, which also explains something that you might not have understood while watching the actual episode.
Yeah, I also liked the episode story in itself. It's basically saying, the message it's giving is that it's never too late to fall in love. In fact, when you fall in love at an age where your life expectancy is shorter, and two people in their 80s or late 70s get together, there's always that awareness that one of them is going to go away soon. And in fact, she talks about it at the funeral, and it's a really heart-stirring moment. When they began connecting the stories, I was like, hey, wait a minute, this is all going to come apart now, because they're going to perfectly tie in all the stories, and this is just not going to work. But I felt like the way they did it, and the fact that they weren't doing it to complete each story, but just touching upon the stories at different points in time, I felt was really smart. And I felt like it really gets the whole thing together nicely. Even though there is no need to do that, because they are all 8 different stories, what their origins are. It's not like it's a fictional tale. But I think the point of doing that is that they are all at the end of the day unfolding in a single universe.
Yeah.
Which is great. So Model Love is this really, sort of heartwarming, fuzzy, fun show to watch.
Yeah, it's one of those things, on any given day around the holidays, if you're feeling slightly blue, if you're feeling slightly lonely, or you just want to watch a show that feels like it's giving you a big warm hug around the holidays, this is possibly the best, most perfect pick, because even if you don't enjoy each and every story on the show, it just leaves you feeling very happy, positive, warm, fuzzy, all of those things. So make yourself a big mug of hot chocolate, get a tray of maybe Christmas sweets or cake, and curl up with your blanket and possibly your cat or your dog and watch this show. And if you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or on ivmpodcast.com. And of course, follow us on our social media handles. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. Of course, if you want to send feedback, comments, questions for Aniruddha and me, then send it to our social media handles. I'm at JaniceSec85 on Instagram and Twitter. And Aniruddha is at Aniguha on Instagram and Twitter. See you guys next time. Happy holidays!
Filter coffee is a fascinating beverage. You need to pick the right beans, blend them in the right proportion, roast them to perfection, and slow brew at the right temperature to get the perfect cup. Which is exactly like great conversations as well. You need to track down the most interesting minds, get them into their zone, and settle down for an unhurried, unscripted chat. And coffee for me is always, always, always best enjoyed with friends. I'm Karthik Nagarajan, and do share my table as I meet some of the most interesting people I know and sit them down for a strong cup of coffee and an even stronger conversation. Join me every Wednesday for a freshly brewed episode. This is not frappe. This is the Filter Coffee Podcast.
Remember the last vacation you took? What about the one you took 3 years ago? Okay, how much do you really remember? It's a question I've asked myself often over a decade of traveling the world. Hey, I'm Utsav, and I do not travel the world for a living. I have a full-time job and responsibilities, but I have made traveling the world a priority. Priority enough that I negotiate extra leave in my job contracts, obsessively track my frequent flyer miles, and I'm willing to take off at the sight of a cheap ticket. Yes, I am cheap. I have lived and worked in 3 countries. I understand human behavior for a living, and these experiences have given me unique insights into places, people, and culture. With over a decade of travel behind me, I increasingly realized one thing, that we cannot see everything. So whatever we see, we must see deeply. Because as the film of memory decays, the imprints which will stand the test of time are the ones felt by the immersion of the senses, not by fleeting encounters with them. Postcards from Nowhere is an immersion into the world of slow travel, one story at a time. Tune in every Thursday on the IVM Podcasts app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts from.